Assalamu alaikum and good evening, everyone. I am now starting with the 11th lecture on the topic of thanatology. And in this lecture, I'll discuss the changes after death, starting from the primary flaccidity to the rigidity after death and secondary relaxation, which starts with the process of putrefaction. So in this lecture, we'll discuss the initial changes and the rigor mortis which appear after death. We will discuss the mechanics or the basics which causes the primary flaccidity, and we'll try to understand what is the definition of rigor mortis, what is normal physiology, what is the altered physiology which causes this rigidity. Then we'll discuss what is the chemical basis of this rigidity to appear. Then what is the characteristics in how it progresses. That is the progression of the rigor mortis, the time during which it starts, or how long it develops, and how long it stays, and the time to pass it off. So this progression is a CRANIO-CAUDAL, and what is the basis of this CRANIO-CAUDAL, that is head to toe development. Then we'll discuss certain special features which are related with the rigor mortis. Then I'll talk about the breaking of this rigor mortis, how we can break it, and what happens after the breaking of rigor mortis. So now I'll start the 11th lecture. Thank you. Hello, assalamu alaikum and good evening. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. And I'm going to start the 11th lecture of the series of topics of thanatology. And the learning objective of this lecture will be that after this lecture, we'll be able to understand what are muscle changes which appear after death. And they are the primary flaccidity, which immediately appear at the time of the death, rigor mortis, that is the rigidity after death, and putrefaction rigidity, which develops at the time of putrefaction. And when the putrefaction sets in, the rigor mortis, it is abolished and there is secondary relaxation. That secondary relaxation is due to putrefaction process. Then we'll define what is rigor mortis, how it distributes into the body, and what is its progression. Normally, it is CRANIO-CAUDAL development or progression, that is from head to toe. Then we will discuss in this lecture the chemical basis of rigor mortis. A little bit about the normal physiology we'll talk about, and what is the altered physiology in the muscles after death, which causes rigor mortis. Then we will discuss the special features, certain special features which are related with the rigor mortis, because they should be distinct from the rigidity. Then there are certain special features which appear in the heart, skin, uterus, seminal vesicles, and in eyes. Then in today's lecture, we will discuss how we can break the rigor mortis and what happens when the rigor mortis breaks. So starting with the today's topic, that what are the muscle changes which appear after death? The first change is the primary flaccidity. This is the first period of relaxation at the time of death. Then rigor mortis, which is cadaveric rigidity or rigidity after death, which develops after a certain period after death. Then the secondary relaxation, which is the second period of relaxation, and this appears when the putrefaction sets in. The cause of primary flaccidity is that it appears immediately after death due to loss of innervation, and body remains in flaccid state for approximately 2 to 3 hours. All the muscles of the body get completely relaxed. Muscle tone is lost, and you can move the body in any direction. Now, the rigor mortis. This is a rigidity after death or postmortem rigidity. Rigor means rigidity, mortis is death. So, by word meaning, it means rigidity after death. It is a condition characterized by stiffening, shortening, and opacity of muscles. And it follows primary relaxation, and it is due to chemical changes which involve the proteins of the muscle fibers to get rigid. It marks the end of the cellular or the molecular life of the muscle fibers. Now, about the definition of rigor mortis, it is a condition characterized by stiffening of all the muscles fibers of the body after death, which is due to certain chemical changes in the proteins of the muscle fiber. So this is stiffening up all the muscle fibers of the body. It is associated with little but not measurable shortening of the muscle. And it is succeeded by primary flaccidity and is followed by secondary flaccidity. Primary flaccidity due to loss of innervation, loss of central nervous system, and the secondary flaccidity or secondary relaxation because of the degeneration of putrefaction. So how it distributes or progresses? The rigor mortis, it develops in all the muscles of the body, and it starts developing simultaneously, but it is first detectable in the muscles of the eyelids and the face. Then it progresses to the neck. Muscles of the neck are involved, then the trunk muscles, and finally muscle of the limbs. And this is known as proximodistal progression or head to toe progression of rigor mortis, also called as CRANIO-CAUDAL, that is from head to toe, because it starts manifesting first in the muscles of the face and the neck, and then later to the bigger muscles of the limbs. Depending upon various factors, all the muscles develop rigor mortis in about 12 hours. That means to develop full body into rigor, it takes 12 hours. From head to toe, it takes 12 hours to develop complete rigor mortis, and the whole body after 12 hours assumes a board-like rigidity, stiff body, and you cannot move the limbs. This is how that the body is completely stiffened and it has been placed on two stretchers, and the hip is in the middle and it is not going to relax, but it remains rigid like board. And once developed, then the rigor mortis persists for about 12 hours. First, it takes 12 hours to develop on, and then for 12 hours it persists. And then it starts passing off in the next 12 hours in the same order in which it has developed. That is, from head to toe, it will pass off. That first it will pass off in the face and the neck muscles, and in the end, the muscles of the limb. When it is fully passed off, it passes on to the next stage of secondary relaxation, which is because of putrefaction. So when the rigor mortis is fully developed, the joints of the body becomes fixed. The state of flexion or extension of the joints will depend upon the position of the trunk and the limbs at the time of death. If the rigor mortis develops in a body when it was supine, that is, face was facing upwards, at the time of death, the large joints will be slightly flexed and the joints of the toes and the fingers are markedly flexed. In fact, this flexion of the joints is due to a little shortening of the muscles of the forearms and the legs. So this is the slightly flexed knee joints. And this was the position in which the body was lying, and it became fixed in this position. This is not the normal flexion, but the body was in such position and it became stiffed. And now when the body is put on a straight surface, it remains in the same posture in which they were stiffened. Now, what is the chemical basis of rigor mortis? The rigor mortis has nothing to do with the nerve supply, as it also develops in the paralyzed muscles. It has been seen that the paralyzed muscles also undergo into rigor, and so it is not dependent upon the nerve supply. When we have briefly discussed the normophysiology in the living, as we know, the muscles, it's an contractile element of muscle which consists of myosin and actin, and they interdigitate with each other. They interdigitate less in the relaxed state and more in contracted state. So this is a diagrammatic representation of the contraction and relaxation of the actin and myosin filament bundles of the muscle fiber. This is a closer view of the actin and myosin bundles. So the relaxation and contraction of muscles, this is controlled by ATP, because the function of the myosin and actin myosin and actin, it requires energy, which is provided by the ATPs. And ATP is stored in high concentration in muscles. A balanced production of ATP from the glycogen store is responsible for the relaxation and contraction of the muscle fibers. So this is normal physiology which we are discussing. This is a diagram of mitochondria, which is the energy source or the energy factory of the human cell. And during life, due to availability of the ATP enzyme in the muscles, muscle can contract and relax. There is Krebs citric acid cycle, which is the metabolic or metabolism cycle, utilizing the oxygen and the other metabolites and releasing the ATPs. Then glycolysis also going on. This is an other process by which the enzymes are acting on the metabolites and the energy is being produced by glycolysis. Now, this was when the person was living. Then what happens after death? Physiology changes after death. It is said that in temporary period of primary flaccidity, when the resynthesis of ATP goes on after death with anaerobic glycolysis from the available glycogen reserves. So the glycogen reserves in the muscle, and there is anaerobic glycogenolysis which is going on in the muscles till the glycogen contents are completely utilized. So till that period, this is the factor which is responsible for maintaining the core temperature of the body for some time after death, and the similar process is responsible for keeping the body in a relaxed state after death till the glycogen reserves are available. So the onset of rigor mortis will therefore be directly influenced by the glycogen content of the muscles at the time of death. This glycogen content will also depend upon the state of rest or activity of the muscles immediately before death. The lack of oxygen means that energy cannot be obtained from glycogen via aerobic glycolysis. But rigor mortis is also temperature dependent. The physiochemical change that occurs within the muscle cells as a result of lack of oxygen, which will further affect the breakdown of the glycogen. The ATP production will cease, and once the glycogen reserves are depleted and resynthesis of ATP ceases, thereafter the breakdown of ATP starts anaerobically. So after death, the ATP production, which is going on anaerobically, thereafter the breakdown of ATP starts anaerobically and it leads to accumulation of lactic acid. So on the one side, the ATP production continues anaerobically, which is responsible for the flaccidity of the muscles, but on the same time, there is production of lactic acid, which will be responsible for falling of pH level. And this lactic acid produced as a result of anoxic or deoxygenated respiration or anaerobic glycogenolysis, the cell metabolism increase its acidity. So the environment will become now more acidic because of the accumulation of lactic acid. In the presence of low ATP and increased acidity, actin and myosin filaments, they form a gel. And this results of this cellular metabolic change is that the muscle become fixed, stiff, and rigid. During this process, there are certain other electrolytes, the calcium influx and the other electrolytes, they also play a role. But the major factor which is responsible for development of this rigor mortis is this what we have discussed. So this is a diagram which is showing on the top is the muscles which have been in a relaxed state. In the middle is the contracted muscle, and the lowermost is for the muscles in rigor, fibers which are in rigor. Then we'll talk about certain special features which are attached with the rigor mortis, like heart. The rigor mortis of the heart muscle produces a firm, thickened, and contracted left ventricle, and it contains a little blood in it. This finding should not be mistaken as myocardial hypertrophy. So we should distinct this that this thickening of left atrium is not the myocardial hypertrophy. Similarly, the secondary muscular flaccidity may result in the distension of the atria and the ventricle, and this should not be mistaken for antemortem dilatation of the chambers or myocardial degeneration. So we should distinct these changes from the normal physiology. Now regarding skin, rigor mortis of the erector pylori muscles causes their contraction, and it may result in the condition of the skin known as cutis anserina or goose skin, which causes the muscle, uh, the skin, muscles in the skin, the erector pylori, they cause the hair to erect up. And this condition is also seen in drowning, where this is believed that the phenomena is caused by the agonal contraction of the erector pylori muscles because of the cold water. And this is how it appears. You can see the erection of the erector pylori muscle, and which leads to erection or straightening of the hair. And these are the puckered or raised contracted pylori muscles. Then the other features in the eye, the rigor mortis also when affects the iris muscle of the eye, giving rise to irregularity in the size of the pupil. Similarly, in the seminal vesicle, the muscles of the walls of the seminal vesicle which contracts and the seminal fluid might be discharged, and this discharge of the seminal fluid may not be mistaken for the evidence of emission in case of sexual assault. Similarly, a special feature in the uterus, the postmortem delivery can also take place as a result of the contraction of uterine muscles. Then talking about the rigor, in the rigor the muscles are more brittle, and if the limb or any joint of the rigor mortis has developed is bent forcibly, then the rigor will break and it will become flaccid, and rigor mortis later on will not appear. It will disappear forever. So the summary of today's lecture is that we have discussed what are changes which appear in the muscles after death, and they are primary flaccidity, the rigor mortis, and the putefactive rigidity and secondary relaxation. Then we have learned the definition of rigor mortis and distribution of rigor mortis, how it progresses. The CRANIO-CAUDAL progression we have discussed in its development. Then we have discussed and understood what is the chemical basis of rigor mortis. And to understand this, we have just gone through briefly through normal physiology and altered physiology, which occurs in the muscles after death. Then we have discussed certain special features in certain organs which show a characteristic which may disguise into another problem or disease. So they should be distinct. We have understood that the heart, skin, uterus, seminal vesicle, and eye show special characters, and they should be distincted from the rigor mortis. Then about the breaking of rigor, we have discussed and understood that once it is broken, it will not appear again. It gone forever. So thank you very much. That is all about today's lecture, lecture number 11, and then we'll discuss in the next lecture. Take care and Allah.